This is an analysis from Alpha Business Media. Today, we're diving into the deep economic paradox that sits right at the heart of Nepal, a nation that's caught between a vital lifeline and a major barrier to its own growth.
The whole story really starts with this one number, 26.89%. Just think about that. That's the share of Nepal's entire economy that came from money sent home by workers abroad in 2023. Now, this flow of cash is absolutely crucial for millions of families, but it also creates this powerful side effect that gets to the very core of the country's supply chain challenges.
You know, economists actually have a name for this. They call it Dutch disease. And the concept is pretty simple. When a flood of foreign money comes into a country, it makes the local currency stronger. So what happens? Well, suddenly imported goods look a lot cheaper and more attractive. At the same time, locally made goods become more expensive for the rest of the world to buy. It's a paradox, right? The very money that's sustaining the nation is also inadvertently suppressing its own industrial growth.
And this leads us directly to the first major consequence, a severe and persistent imbalance in trade.
Look at this figure. Over 1.2 trillion Nepalese rupees. That was the trade deficit in just the first 10 months of the fiscal year. This isn't just a number. It's a stark indicator of an economy that is buying far, far more than it sells.
And this chart, well, it just visualizes the incredible scale of the problem. That small bar on the left, that represents everything Nepal exported to the world. And that towering bar on the right is everything it imported. That massive gap in between, that is the story of the country's economic challenge.
So what exactly is crossing the borders? On the import side, you've got high-value, complex goods, electronics, vehicles, petroleum. But on the domestic production side, the list is dominated by consumer goods, things like noodles, basic footwear, and beverages. This contrast really highlights the dependency on foreign industry for those high-value items.
And we absolutely have to acknowledge the successes. I mean, brands like YY Noodles and Gold Star Shoes are household names. They prove that made in Nepal can be a real mark of quality and success. But they're often the exceptions that prove the rule. They throw the systemic barriers that prevent more companies from following in their footsteps into really sharp relief.
All right, Section 2, a web of challenges. Here, we're going to look at why it's so difficult for domestic producers to compete.
You see, the challenges are all tangled up together. You've got infrastructure bottlenecks driving up costs, a brain drain is sapping the country of its innovators, there's a massive $3.6 billion financing gap that restricts small businesses, and a heavy reliance on imported raw materials just creates even more dependency. Each problem just feeds right into the next, creating a cycle that's incredibly tough to break.
Let's just zoom in on infrastructure for a second. Imagine trying to run a factory when logistics eat up a quarter of your product's value, when power cuts can slash your output by half, and because you're landlocked, it adds over a month to your shipping times to Europe. These are not minor inconveniences. These are fundamental barriers to competitiveness.
And then, of course, there's the human cost. This number, it represents hundreds of thousands of Nepalese who left for work abroad in just a single year. And these aren't just laborers, they are potential entrepreneurs, engineers, and innovators.
This migration creates a really vicious cycle. The most skilled and educated youth leave because there's a lack of opportunity. But that, in turn, deepens the shortage of the very talent you need to create those opportunities. It's a brain drain that starves the domestic economy of its most vital resource.
Okay, let's pivot. Section 3, Pathways to Self-Reliance. Because despite all these challenges, there are immense opportunities for growth.
This is where Nepal stands today, with its hydropower capacity, just over 3,000 megawatts. It's a respectable number, for sure, but it's really only the beginning of the story.
Because this is the potential, 42,000 megawatts. Tapping into this vast, clean energy resource isn't just an opportunity, it's a potential game changer. It could provide cheap, reliable power that would fundamentally transform the cost structure for every single domestic manufacturer.
And alongside energy, there's this quiet revolution happening in the digital space. With nearly 25 million mobile banking users and a rapidly growing e-commerce market, digital platforms are allowing businesses to bypass those traditional infrastructure gaps, connect directly with customers, and compete in ways that were frankly impossible just a decade ago.
So harnessing this potential requires a coordinated strategy. The government has to lead on infrastructure and policy. Producers have to innovate and build strong brands. And crucial support systems for finance and for human capital need to be put in place to empower them. No single step is enough here. All these elements have to move forward together.
Which brings us to our final section, the production paradigm shift. This is really the core takeaway. The long-term goal for Nepal has to be this major transition from an economy that primarily consumes, using money earned somewhere else, to one that produces, creating value, creating jobs, and building resilience right there at home.
And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. What if the nation's greatest strength, that massive inflow of remittances, could be redirected away from just pure consumption and into the very businesses and industries that can build a new, production-driven future? The answer to this question may well define Nepal's economic destiny.
This has been an analysis from Alpha Business Media.